Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Digital Grocer, Mercatus' very own podcast, episode 23. It's actually the end of season 2.
Yes, it is.
Is that right, Mark?
Yes, it is.
And this is your host, Sylvain Perrier, President and CEO of Mercatus Technologies. And joining me in the studio today is Mercatus' very own Senior Director of Marketing, Mark Fairhurst.
It's good to be back.
It's good to be back. And it's, Christmas is just literally around the corner. I think, 2 weeks now? A week? 10 days.
Hopefully it's 2 weeks because I haven't done any shopping.
No, I have not done any shopping. And we are without our trusted engineer. So I'm going to apologize way ahead of time right now. Kevin is sick. Bubonic plague is what I've been told.
You got to stop giving that to him.
I know. Well, I thought it was smallpox. It is. Smallpox is in fashion now, by the way.
Is it?
I apologize for everyone who's listening who may have smallpox or have had a distant, very old relative.
Now, is that because
the anti-vaxxers?
The anti-vaxxers.
Probably. I don't know anymore. It's really hard to follow this. It's making a comeback. In my district where I live, Mark, the school boards are actually putting their foot down. If you refuse certain vaccines, your child can be sent home.
Yeah, for the common good of everyone. Right. In my opinion, it makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. But, everyone's entitled to their opinion, right? That's the beauty about living in a democracy. Mm-hmm. And apparently that's what I'm told, right? But in any case, so today it's kind of an interesting show, and we're going to be bouncing around here on a bunch of topics. It's the 2019 wrap up. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened in the industry. We're going to be talking about, the predictions that were published in, I think it was a Grocery Dive that published the Mercatus 2020 predictions.
That's right.
We'll talk about kind of a new way of measuring customer value. So CLTV, customer lifetime value. Mm-hmm. It's something that's more traditionally used in the SaaS industry, Mark?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not a metric that I think typically is used amongst our industry, in the grocery industry in particular. Mm-hmm. But in the technology SaaS world, where I come from, and then you've been immersed for
quite some time,
a lot of years, it is definitely one of the key benchmarks for any subscription service. Yeah,
it's also what we're finding in our world, right? Because we do B2B sales, to our retailers and want to license our technology. And it's a very focused sales and marketing process.
Correct.
So we deal with stuff like marketing funnels, sales funnels, and that's something we don't hear about in the grocery space.
No, it's kind of bizarre if you think about it. It's a grocer they need to cultivate the relationship with the shopper. Mm-hmm. They obviously would like to get more shoppers in their stores.
Right. And especially for the retailers that have loyalty programs, there's no reason why they can't do that.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole reason for having a loyalty program.
Exactly.
Is to keep the shopper coming back.
Absolutely. Now, the last subject we'll tackle on the show today is we just got back from New York City. Mm-hmm. I think it was literally a week ago.
Right.
We were invited to the Barclays event.
Mm-hmm.
Eat,
sleep,
play. I don't know. There was no pray part. But
no.
It was a great event. It was serendipitous. We were invited to the event by Karen Short. Karen was a guest. I think it would have been mid-season 2. We were talking about, I think the title was The Myth About Instacart.
Yeah, the Instacart addiction.
Yeah, the Instacart addiction. Correct. And then she was on the show and she dialed in from New York and we had a bunch of stuff. Oh, Emmy's coming in. Emmy's in our marketing team.
She's an integral part of the market.
And she is. And she's going to be watching us recording today. And if we do something wrong, she'll throw something at us, I'm sure. So let's start with the predictions. Let me kind of go to these prediction things. People always kind of ask me, how hard are they to kind of come up with and so on. Kind of the reality about when you go through some of these things, it's not like there's a dartboard in my office and then I just throw something out there. The reality is that it really comes about from talking to people in the space, whether it's a CMO, whether it's a CIO, and just listening also to the undercurrent. And what I call the undercurrent is, attending vendor meetings, attending vendor presentations, attending, quite frankly, a majority of the trade shows in the space, whether it's Grocery Shop, whether it's FMI Midwinter. It's not so much of a trade show, but it's a gathering of retailers, or quite frankly, going into WCAG in California and so on. And then you kind of cultivate these contacts in the space, and then you kind of find out what's happening. And then reading the trades, and not just the traditional trades in the grocery space, but also just consuming a tremendous amount of media.
Right.
The really big thing out of the 2020 predictions that stood out for me in any case is the notion of marketplaces. And that's kind of mixed with the first prediction that we published on Grocery Dive, which is the reverse Amazon model.
Right.
And it was interesting because the moment we had submitted our predictions, was it Loblaws?
I think it was the day after
Yeah.
that the article was published, that Loblaws, which is the largest grocery retailer in Canada, had announced that they have launched their marketplace for drop ship products.
Yeah, Mark, they did something a bit different. As opposed to partnering, they decided to buy the technology outright.
The team now made, I think, part of Loblaw Digital.
Yeah.
The company they purchased was PF Tech out of Las Vegas.
Yeah, Las Vegas.
And I think they've been working on this for the last year.
It's really odd. We don't see a lot of tech coming out of Las Vegas.
It may be that there's an undercurrent of tech companies there that we just aren't aware of.
Yeah.
But obviously Loblaws knew about them.
Yeah, they did. Did they move them? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So in any case, what the concept was is essentially we know that in the world of Amazon, what truly makes them interested in grocery aside from the data is grocery has an extremely high household penetration rate, something north of 95%. So, okay, so what does that mean? Is essentially majority of the U.S. consumers are actually buying groceries at least 1.x times a week. So call it 1.2 to 1.5. In e-commerce, we're seeing 1.6 to 1.9. So it really, really depends. And then you go down into the other verticals in retail. And then that household penetration rate seamlessly gets much lower. Now, we know that a majority of US adults actually use Amazon.com. We know that from our own research. I remember when we did research out in the West Coast, 86 to 92% of the households we actually surveyed were using Amazon on a monthly basis. And if you look at Amazon's core verticals and what they do, right? So it's not just about selling things online. It's about enabling the consumption of media. So their Prime videos, their music, and so on. They've also gotten into the more commoditized space with the Echo devices and so on. They tried their hands at phones, which was a catastrophic failure for them.
Right.
And also their whole tablets and so on. So for them is getting more eyeballs more frequently, consuming content as well as potentially buying something. So getting into the grocery space makes sense. So if you're a grocer and you have a lot of weekly visits, so let's take Walmart, for example. There was this wonderful book that was written on Walmart. Can't even remember the title. I ended up reading it and buying the audio tapes for those of you who may remember cassettes.
Just a brief interruption. This is Emmy. Let me throw in a little insight here. The book that Sylvain is trying to recall is The Walmart Effect by Charles Fishman.
And listening this into my car, and there was a famous quote in the book, which was 90% of the United States. Now, this would have been in the 90s, right? So 90% of the United States actually lives less than 16 miles from a Walmart.
Yeah, I would believe it.
And that's pretty impactful.
It's probably even more now.
Right. And so we know they're the largest seller of food in the United States. They actually, I think they eclipse Kroger. I'm pretty sure they do. If they don't, I apologize.
No, they do.
Okay, they do. So if you know that, so that means Walmart has a high household penetration rate. So why wouldn't they in their .com space layer in a marketplace? And if you take that concept even further to a traditional grocer who doesn't do hard lines or soft lines, I don't know. A good example could be an H-E-B, could be a smaller retailer like a Schnucks in the St. Louis market. If you go out and you layer in a marketplace which enables organizations to come in through your .com to sell items, dishware, cookware, barbecues. I mean, the list goes on. Anything that's complementary to food. I'm not yet convinced that this needs to be like a Best Buy approach. Right, or in the day where a lot of these electronic retailers went out and actually stopped selling what was called white goods, white goods being refrigerators, washers, and dryers, and they replaced it with the DVDs and CD racks, and some of these CompUSA would have been their downfall, quite frankly, and some other ones. But if you take the concept of adding items to your marketplace, you have the eyeballs. The margins are excessive. I've been told the return on investment on some of these marketplace solutions is a 10 to 1.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing. But for the retailer, quite frankly, if you do it right, and doing it right is understanding where your brand and where your brand needs to go from a business perspective, it can be extremely powerful in terms of the margin that you can make. So that's what we dubbed at Mercatus the reverse Amazon model. I applaud Loblaws for doing it in Canada. It's gutsy.
To your point, they will be curating the content, the products.
Yes.
That will be complementary to their President's Choice brands.
Well, this also makes them a formidable challenger, not only to Amazon here in Canada, which Amazon dominates e-commerce here and for food in the Canadian space. Well, what it also does is it puts them head to head now with Walmart from a digital perspective here in this country, which is great for them.
Yeah, competition's good.
Yeah, competition's always great. Well, in Canada, we have 3 retailers that own 88% of the marketplace.
Yeah.
But let's also understand we have some amazing niche, smaller grocery retailers in the Canadian space that are independent or sometimes are owned by some larger conglomerates that people are fanatical about and do quite well. I mean, if you think of Farm Boy, Friesen over and Brothers over in Alberta, and then you have Longo's in the GTA, and I'm an exclusive shopper to Longo's, and why? Because the produce is amazing, the staff is extremely efficient and friendly, and the
quality of the goods throughout the store,
and the stores are clean. And I'm a destination shopper, so to go into a box that's 150,000 square feet just numbs my mind for some reason. It's kind of like, I'm here for the food experience first, and I think everything else, like the more hard lines and soft lines, I'm less of I don't have that exploration bug in me to want to kind of go through those things. I want to get in and out as fast as possible. That's pretty critical. Now, one of the other predictions that we made that's very topical for the podcast is, we called it the commoditization of delivery. When you hear the word commoditization, some people may think, oh my God, that's really scary in terms of what does that mean? But at the end of the day, I think we've seen the pendulums swing really far towards delivery, to the point where some of our organizations have really stifled the innovation capabilities of a lot of the retailers that are using some of these technologies, and the ecosystem has been shut out. And a lot of 2019 was focused for us on talking about, in that case, around Instacart. We've gotten a lot of phone calls and a lot of LinkedIn messages saying how we're unfairly picking on Instacart. And the reality is that it's not just an Instacart conversation. What we're trying to open the eyes of the retailers here and to say, hey, listen, at the end of the day, you as a retailer, you own your brick and mortar, you own everything around it, you own the in-store experience, you own your private label brands and so on. So why are you sacrificing everything else? And a lot of applause has come in from a lot of the ecosystem partners that also are getting shut out of that experience when a retailer decides to go with such a solution as Instacart.
Yeah, just picking up on that. I mean, as the marketing lead, I'm sensitive to the criticism that, we're unfairly picking on a competitor. And to my earlier point, I do honestly believe competition is good, pushes everyone to excel in the interest of the end customer. But at the same time, the customer needs to be educated as to what the full range of options are, so they know what they're getting into.
Right.
And that's the position that I take, and I think we imbue all of our content with that position.
Yeah, I think the big difference for 2020 is a lot of the retailers are kind of understand now what we're saying, and are starting to make some really tough decisions in terms of, how do I get the best of both worlds? How do I enable control of my own digital roadmap, and at the same time bring in the right partners, not just one, to the table to really maximize and when I say maximize, but eliminate all friction points around the customer journey. And there's one prediction we didn't write, and I was actually reflecting it on this week. There's a lack of understanding, and there's a lack of pure digital natives in the space.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where we normally see them at Mercatus, at agencies that can actually sit down and say, hey, this is more than just a veneer on a website. It's more than just, call it an operational process, and so on. what is the strategic endeavor and benefit what we're trying to achieve, and how does that convert into, into the world of digital marketing? There is a lot of pretend people out there that I'm now kind of uncovering more so than ever when you start to look under the cover and start to ask questions. And my fear is that we're still, for some retailers, in check the box mode. And that's why they've gone with these more commoditized solutions. I think in 2020, that's going to change, or we're going to have to change it for them. I think there's no choice.
Yeah, and we started this podcast series, with our friend Brittain Ladd, and he was talking about retailers being surrounded and having to play the infinite game and being more strategic. And I certainly hope that the retailers that we're encountering and talking to on a regular basis are really heeding that message and understanding that e-commerce, online, offline, there is no division. It's all about a unified commerce approach. Shoppers are going to purchase where, when, how they want, and you need to be ready to serve that.
When I look at the landscape today, there are two retailers that get this really well. Walmart. I think they have rapidly excelled, quite frankly, not just through their acquisitions, but I think in a cultural shift in their head office. They've brought the right executives to the table. I think it's still the challenge for them is the balancing act between the dollars that their capital they're spending in their e-commerce realm and what they're losing, and the attention that they need to draw towards their brick and mortar operation.
Right. I mean, they're still held to a different standard than, say, Amazon is. Yeah. Amazon leverages the revenue they get from other services.
Correct.
And there's a tolerance for Amazon to spend much more so than, say, at Walmart.
Absolutely. The other one is Target. I think it's a brand that, when they came into Canada, I think in the US, they were on the decline. How many cyber attacks were they hit on? Twice. That I can remember. There's also a business that was heavily engaged with Amazon in the day, and they decided to pull out. They had, I think 2 years in a row, they're on the Black Friday, they had a complete system failure. So 2 cyber attacks, damaged brand, they came into the Canadian space. So they've really reinvigorated themselves, and I think they've done well digitally. The acquisition of Shipt was a very interesting one. And so I'm kind of curious to see where that relationship is going to go into 2020. Most people know that we are partnered with Shipt. I mean, we worked well with them in a couple of retailers so far to date. The one retailer stepping outside of grocery, Sean Gensch, who was the former CMO over at Sprouts Farmers Market. So he's now over at JCPenney.
Oh, yeah.
JCPenney. And I think JCPenney has brought in Jackman here out of Toronto to help them out. And they've opened up kind of their new, I don't want to call it flagship, but I think it's one of a store where they're trying to create a new immersive experience for shoppers. So they'll have a barber shop. I think they even have yoga classes inside the JCPenney.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're really trying to go after that more millennial shopper who's got probably more disposable income and so on and so on. And I think I'm wondering if the days of, JCPenney used to be known kind of like a Macy's, like an excessive amount of couponing, right?
Right.
I went to like a Macy's in Miami to buy a shirt, and the shirt was already discounted, and because I was nice to the cashier, she pulled out a 35% off coupon when I told her I was Canadian, and suddenly I think the shirt was like $10 and it would have been a $40 shirt. It was just ridiculous. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're Canadian, to go to the Macy's in Miami, you'll down by the Doral, and then Doral will give you a whole other experience as well.
So what did you say to the cashier to make her?
Well, she asked me if I had a Macy's card, and I said, no, unfortunately, I don't have one. I'm Canadian. And she goes, oh my God, that's so great. And, I have family, and I have family in Montreal, and and
well, it's a little known fact. Canadians are like the largest tourist group attending or visiting Florida on an annual basis.
Absolutely. And I would say probably in Phoenix and Scottsdale as well, right? Yeah. We have people coming down from Alberta and Saskatchewan.
And so all these snowbirds who seek the warm weather.
Yeah. Shout out to everyone in Regina.
Yeah.
So the other prediction that we put forward was recession proofing the company. And it's a tough one because the 5 U.S. economical drivers coming in out of Q4 of this year are looking great. I mean, the U.S. added over 200,000 jobs in November versus Canada, where there was a decline. I think it was negative 71,000 or 72,000 jobs. There's some concerns here in the Canadian space. Food prices are going up here in Canada, so likely the same thing in the United States. So the commodities market is, shaping up in the negative side for the consumer because costs are going up. There was a trucking company that just declared bankruptcy on Monday. Over 3,400 truckers were kind of stranded. The trucking market is in decline. So what's not clear is that a result of the trade war with China.
Right.
That is having an adverse effect of things coming over here. I'm not seeing consumer confidence being shaking anytime soon. I think the reality is you prepare for these things in the best of times. Right.
And again, that's part of being strategic.
Absolutely. And that's looking at supply chain.
Right.
It's actually looking at your investment in private label. I remember in 2008 being on the ground in Charlotte, and people that would traditionally go to, who could afford a Harris Teeter would go into a bottom dollar food. And then the people that couldn't afford a bottom dollar food were either going to a dollar store, and if they couldn't afford that, they were going to a soup kitchen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And there are some retailers in 2008 who, and this is a testimonial to our chairman at the time, who had made massive investment in, along with a bunch of business partners, to some shipping lines that were carrying goods out of China, out of Asia, into the Caribbean, out of Asia into Vancouver, and some of the ports on the East Coast of the United States. They were seeing a decline already in terms of the flow of goods.
So is that one of the early indicators?
It's usually an early indicator. Yeah. I think the one thing that people dismiss, and there was an amazing article at the time, and I think it would have been in the Wall Street Journal, how 7-Eleven predicted the decline in the economy. So 7-Eleven is owned by a large Japanese conglomerate that does a tremendous amount of research. So kudos to them for kind of getting a sense of what was happening. But, the prediction is, I think in 2020, you have to start, focusing on your supply chain, focusing on anything where you can squeeze out cost, maximize the return on your investments inside your brick and mortar, whether that's in private label and so on. I'm always leery when I hear grocery retailers trying to fight on price against Walmart. I think that's a difficult differentiator.
It's a losing game.
Well, it's a losing game because it's a race to the bottom.
Right.
So that's why certain grocers do excessively well, like a Farm Boy,
right,
like an H-E-B, and so on and so on. It's not that they're necessarily more expensive, but they focus on quality and
experience,
and the ratio with price, and the experience in store, and so on. And I think there are certain retailers, I don't want to say they're recession proof, but I think that they won't bleed their best customers.
Right.
And I think if you're a grocer, you have to be mindful of that.
Yeah. On that point, it's, this gets back to something we talked about earlier in the show. It's making sure that you don't let anyone else come between you and your customer.
Yeah.
Right. So if now is the time to make the investment to secure that customer relationship, then take it.
Absolutely. So, Mark, those were the 2020 predictions. So let's talk a little bit about CLTV.
Yes.
Now, for those of you who might not know, in the world of software as a service, right? So SaaS, the reality is there are a bunch of metrics that we look at in our business, right? Reoccurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue. We look at CAC,
churn.
Yeah. CAC's customer acquisition costs. So what is it really? What's our cost of sale, cost of marketing for bringing on board a new customer, or quite frankly for the entire process of doing marketing? And then there's this other element of what we call CLTV, right? So CLTV stands for customer lifetime value. And essentially what it is, it's just a very easy to understand metric, which is a total revenue that you could be generating or reasonably expect from a consumer, right? And I think that's, in our world, that's easy to understand because we're not dealing with millions of consumers, but it's more complex in the world of grocery retail. But the thing that I try to encourage our retailers to understand, when you start to think in the context of CLTV and you start looking at who are your top revenue generators, right? So let's say you only have 10 clients, right? But let's assume it's millions. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for your system provider, your service provider, to be able to generate a report that says, here's your top 100 customers, model them out, and then see who else fits in that quote unquote segment. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's very critical, because once you start to understand those types of customers, that CLTV metric, you start to understand how do you market to those people. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah. You can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
In order to maximize your revenue, mm-hmm. you need to cater to that segment that is generating the most value for your organization.
Yeah, it's an interesting story to go along with that. I remember years ago being at a large Canadian retailer, and I was with their CMO, and we walked into the store. We're visiting the new concept that they have. So we grab a cart because we're going to pretend we're shoppers. The store didn't know who he was, and no one knows who I am. So there's a flyer in the cart, and the flyer literally has items that are circled with a pen. And I look at him, I said, oh, this is interesting. He goes, the challenge we have in our business today is 80% of our revenue actually comes from 20% of our shoppers. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what happens is we have people that exclusively will only shop our flyer, and it's a drain on our margin. He actually, over the years, developed a process to minimize as best as possible the investment in that group of consumers that erodes margin.
Amazing. That's smart.
Very smart. Yeah. And so they deployed at the time an amazing loyalty program that they very much have leveraged.
Big time,
to understand CLTV.
Yes.
And to specifically offer points, an easier redemption process to those top consumers. And now I've started to target that middle layer of consumers that they think they can convert to where they can get better, more of the basket.
But in tandem with that, it's also developing this passion for data.
Right.
Data governance and the insights that come from proper data governance.
Absolutely. And data governance in certain retailers is non-existent. Yeah. Because you'll get a sense of that when you have retailers that aren't happy with their search experience on their websites, or not happy with the fact that they're missing a tremendous amount of images.
Right.
Or quite frankly, they can't get an alignment between the nutritional information or FDA tagging on the shelf down into what's in their e-commerce experience. And it's not necessarily a vendor problem. I think vendors create a lot of friction for no reason in some cases. But it's really understanding the retailer may not necessarily know how to better do that. I love the background noises in Toronto. I think there's like a fire truck or a dump truck doing something.
This is garbage day.
Well, at least it's not a hearse picking up a body on the street. So anyways, we apologize for those background noises. But in any case, but I think when you think of those things, it's not only about sales by square foot.
Yeah.
It's not just about gross revenue.
That's a very insightful comment.
Yeah. And it's difficult to change that tide, right?
It's especially, and again, going back to your earlier point in the show, when you don't have that talent base that is understanding unified commerce.
Right. Now, Mark, we should dig this up and recirculate it, but we have a piece of long form content on the Mercatus blog.
Actually, it was a white paper.
That's right. That's right.
Or I'm sorry, an ebook.
An ebook. Who uses ebook anymore? Like it's a dead form of marketing.
I mean, we've been noticing that content consumption needs to be much more morsel sized.
Yeah, we're actually going to be deploying everything through TikTok now.
Shit, don't tell them either.
I know.
Yeah, it's a great piece of content that we're going to breathe new life into early in the new year. It essentially is the top 10 metrics a grocery retailer needs to measure and follow.
Yeah, and we do our best to try to work with our retailers to kind of talk through these metrics, but it's a challenge. But I encourage the listeners to go through on our website in the blog section and then go through, just click, I think there's a drop down where you can filter resources and you can filter on to.
Or just reach out to either of us directly and we're happy to send it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So our last topic is, we were in New York.
Yep.
We stayed right in Times Square, which I will never do again.
It's a little noisy.
It's not just it's noisy, it's just you're inundated with tourists.
Yes.
And when you're very much focused to get to your destination to do what you need to do on a daily basis, and somebody stops in the front of you to raise their camera to take a picture of...
You didn't jump in and get your photo taken?
No, I'm like, you can buy that same image with a better quality for a lot cheaper than coming here,
It's capturing the memories.
Right. Well, yeah. Little did they know. But in any case, we were invited to go to Barclays to do a fireside chat, which was myself and Tom Fiorita from Point Pickup.
Yep.
Tom's just a really nice guy, super gentleman in the space, tons of Wall Street experience. Point Pickup has what I would equate to an extremely interesting technology platform that really marries retailers with drivers to do delivery.
Right. Yeah, what they call micro level fulfillment.
Yeah, and it's kind of the whole democracy behind that whole idea of pairing a retailer with a driver.
Yeah.
Right? So we announced, even just before we got up on stage for our 1 hour session, we announced our technology partnership. We've introduced Tom to a bunch of our clients. So he's off to the races on that. I think internally we're going to be kind of discussing how is that whole integration now going to unfold. The fireside chat was interesting. We seldomly, it's a different world for us, right? And we don't go, Mercatus doesn't go and meet with investment bankers and so on. So when you're up on stage and you're being interviewed in real time, because there's not much preparation we can do as a business to that. We started off kind of the Mercatus, what do we do? Who do we work with? Tom did the exact same thing. And then Karen just opened up with her questions. And she left the crowd, she shared an interesting question. Where do we see the growth of digital commerce in the grocery retail space up to 2025, right? And Karen's very specific when she wants numbers. And I think, quite frankly, if you work at Barclays, I think everyone does.
Right.
I hesitated to answer the question because the numbers that we are seeing are very different in the space, right? We'll have IGD at Grocery Shop talked about that, 2023, we're thinking US will be 60 billion. You have FMI that's reported 100 billion US. Canadian space is entirely different. I mean, I think we're in the 100 million range this year.
Yep. A lot smaller.
By 2023, it's probably, I think it's sub 2 billion still. Or is it 2.7? Anyways, I can't remember. That's what's from the presentation I did at the Canadian Grocer event. But we're going to have a report published today by Incisive that it's actually the number is closer to 157 point something billion US.
Huge. It's the highest number that I've seen.
It's the highest number.
2025, I think there's
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's actually 57 billion higher than what FMI is reporting. So when I kind of said that, I think Karen was like, whoa, where'd you get these numbers? And I kind of explained to it. I think the interesting thing about being at Barclays is the conversation is different. And Barclays has, and it's an amazing institution, has great relationships with a lot of the retailers, not just in Canada, but overseas. Right. Yep. And we were just before Walmart CEO. And I was just astonished how transparent he was with the challenges they're having as a business, but where they want to take the organization and this whole idea of services and what they're doing with healthcare and their next clinic that they're going to open up in the Atlanta market. And the fact that he shared two things. He had spent the previous week, I think he was in the Kansas City market doing delivery. So Walmart has that new service where you go, they will actually bring the groceries into your house and put them in your refrigerator and the stuff in the pantry. That even some people have invested in additional refrigerators in their garages, and then Walmart will go in. And then somebody asked him, what's the attrition rate or the churn, as we would say in the world of SaaS software? 0.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind.
Yeah, because I think when Walmart first announced it, people were very skeptical as to whether who's going to let a stranger into their house. But when he had said that, that was surprising.
Yeah, it's also that's one of Point Pickup's clients, and I think Tom was quite clear, like the great relationship they have with Walmart and how Walmart's being very progressive in this space and is not taking anything for granted, and I think is really trying to orient itself around customer service.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And that was it. That's what we did at Barclays. And I think, we're looking forward to 2020. Still a couple business trips that we have to tackle before the remainder of the year. And then we're going straight into, in the new year, NRF.
Yep, we'll be at NRF, booth 1418.
Yeah, and then what's after NRF?
Then we'll be attending the FMI Midwinter event. Mm-hmm. And I think that's it until around March.
God, that's that's not that far away.
No, it's
not.
And then we go through the whole thing all over again.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I let you go, I want to say happy holidays, and certainly looking forward to connecting with you guys for our next season of Digital Grocer, which I think we're going to kick it off at NRF.
Yeah, we're already lining up a lot of podcasts to be recorded in the booth.
Yeah.
I'd like to try video, add video to the mix.
I think we need to.
Yeah, just to people say you and I look alike.
Well, I mean, people are going up to you, oh, man, great presentation at Barclays. Can I have the presentation?
I said, yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the compliment.
Sir, you're not allowed to jaywalk. That wasn't me.
That was the other guy.
That was the other guy.
So,
hey, Mark, how do people get a hold of us?
Go to our website, www.mercatus.com. All of the contact details are there. Happy to hear from anyone.
Awesome. And folks, if you want to hear anything specific in season 3, just don't hesitate to send Mark and I some topics, or if you think there's a guest that you'd like for us to interview, please let us know. And again, looking forward to catching up with you guys in 2020. Thank you.